everybody. Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Oh, my gosh. Say hello.
See you. Mwah. Hey, Nero.
All right.
Welcome, everyone, to this session on transatlantic relations with two superstar leaders. I don't think From the Bottom Up is the right title for this conversation between these two economic powerhouses, but we'll give MSC a break because it's relatively new that local and regional leaders come here to Munich. I'm Nina Habchigian. I'm the president and CEO of a new nonpartisan nonprofit called the Alliance for Local Leaders International, or ALLIES for short. We are connecting local leaders around the world to cooperate with each other to share and solve challenges, especially in their work to protect and expand liberties and democratic systems. We are coming together, as we have all been discussing, at a time of disruption within the United States and also between the United States and Europe, Secretary Rubio's measured speech notwithstanding. The discussion that we'll have today is how does a transatlantic partnership affect states within nations, and what power do they have to shape this critical relationship? I'm honored to be the moderator of this conversation between Minister President Rhein of Hesse and Governor Gavin Newsom of California. I was noticing when looking at their biographies that they have similar trajectories from working in cities, Frankfurt and San Francisco, and then senior positions within their state governments until they were elected to be leaders of their states. So today I will pose a few questions to these gentlemen, and then you will also have a chance. So let me start with you, Minister President. The same question to both of you. How do you think about the importance of the transnational partnership when it comes to the states that you govern? What areas of life does it touch, being clean energy, culture, sports, science? To you to start.
Ja, wenn ich da
Sure. If I may, I would like to start with the history of my state, Hesse. Hesse just had its 80th birthday this year, and Hesse was actually brought to life based on the command of the former occupational powers, the Americans back then. Nowadays, this state is an absolute success story, and that's why we have such a very special relationship. And I oftentimes think about what would have become of me if I had grown up in Leipzig in a different state, so in the GDR, under the Soviet powers and not in an American zone. And of course, around me, I lived in the Frankfurter Dornbusch. We had AFN, PX, housing areas, and also lots of GIs. And of course, for us, the GIs were always friends. We never thought they were occupying us. Never, not once. And that's why this whole German-American relationship to us isn't just any international relationship. We have, of course, special relationships to any other country in the state as well, and especially, of course, Hesse also with the Frankfurt airport and being the financial center of Europe. But I have to say, America to us is a very special country, and I feel so incredibly grateful towards this country. And I think today, of course, it is also one of our absolute most important trade partners. Now, for the General Consulate, we are the biggest location, 1,000 employees. We have a very large American community in our beautiful city. And yes, a lot is coming together there. And that's why I believe partnerships on such a state level, even though, of course, we are a little bit smaller, I don't think that we can really compare ourselves to California. It's a huge state, of course, with a huge GDP. But still, we have a partnership. I think I also just told the governor, we also have a partnership with Wisconsin. We have city partnerships. We have partnerships between students, and of course also economic partnerships, but I think even more important than that, scientific partnerships. And this collaboration is really what brings us so closely together. And I'm saying that so consciously, and it doesn't really matter who's president at any given moment. It doesn't really matter what the majorities are in the country. At this level, it doesn't really play a big role because the people are who comes together, and that's what makes the relationship so special.
Governor.
Appreciate your comments. Look, in the spirit of your opening remarks, let me add mine. I come from an American state that's the size of 21 American states combined. We're a majority-minority state. 27% of the state is foreign-born, which is an important point. We practice pluralism. That's a word might be even banned one day in the United States, but not currently. We're a universal state. My state of mind is in that construct. I come from San Francisco, a city that has been described as 49 square miles surrounded by reality. But it's a city, but like our state, of dreamers, of doers, entrepreneurs, innovators. But at its core, we pride ourselves on being on leading and cutting edge of new ideas. We say about our state, the future happens there first. We're America's coming attraction. And that's a mindset in the context of your question, that we feel we have agency, that we're not bystanders in the world, that we can shape the future. And so in the spirit of the subnational, in the spirit of people to people, in the spirit of diplomacy, in the spirit of transatlantic partnerships, we feel a unique responsibility to fill the void, to step in to the moment. And that goes back to the founding of my great state 175 years ago. And it exists and persists today. And when I say today, quite literally, today we signed an additional MOU with Lviv in Ukraine. It's one of 28 MOUs that I've had the privilege to sign as governor across the spectrum of the frame that you just announced. Low carbon, green growth, of course. California has been the dominant leader in the United States in changing the way it produces and consumes energy. We continue to lead in that space. But also, as it relates to exchange of ideas and idealism and values, in terms of energy and daring, that entrepreneurial spirit defined through technical assistance and teams, through research and development. Germany, China, and California, the three largest jurisdictions in terms of R&D in the world. Point of pride and not in a point in common that is incredibly important. And it aligns our values, and it is expressed formally through these structured memorandums of understanding across the spectrum. We're involved in the climate space with the Under 2 coalition that started here in Germany. We're co-chairs of the MOU Under 2 coalition with 34 other similarly sized states and half of the global population. So again, issues of climate, issues of academic excellence and scientific investments, also in culture and sports. So we're going to have two, we've got the Olympics coming in next year, to your question. We obviously are going to enjoy World Cup. California continues to have an open hand, not a closed fist, as it relates to this transatlantic alliance, as it relates to this moment we're living in with all of the stress and the anxiety we're feeling, particularly in Washington, D.C.
Well, speaking of that stress and tension at the national level, I'd like you to talk about to what degree subnational ties can help maintain and grow this transatlantic relationship. And let's start with values that you mentioned. The transatlantic relationship has always been held together by a shared set of values: individual liberties, pluralism, equality, rule of law. The U.S. administration is not always adhering to these ideals. But Governor Newsom, as I live in your state, I know that you have not wavered. And I wanted you to talk about how important are these values to you and your constituents, and does it help shore up the transatlantic relationship if California stands up for them?
Well, that's why I'm here. I mean, it's not the rule of law, it's the rule of dawn. And I hope it's dawning on all of you that's the case. It's the law of the jungle. Might makes right. You know, it was interesting, you mentioned Rubio's speech today. I liked it tonally. I liked this notion of Western civilization. If he's referring, in that case, to the best of Roman Republic and Greek democracy, co-equal branches of government, if he's referencing popular sovereignty and the rule of law, I align with his remarks. If it's about an imperialism and an imperial presidency, I don't necessarily. So I'm here to try to fill that void and to express what I hope you understand, that Donald Trump is not only temporary, but he may be among the most un-American presidents ever to have resided at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And I really believe that. I don't say that lightly. He's an invasive species. He's taken over the Republican Party. You know, I sit every single day in Ronald Reagan's old office. Ronald Reagan was governor of California. Ronald Reagan would be ashamed of this moment in time. You know, Ronald Reagan, whose last speech in the Oval Office was about Lady Liberty's torch, about the energy and daring of newcomers and what defines America from the rest of the globe. Those values are being vandalized in real time. Our republic is being vandalized in real time. This historic project of our founding fathers. It's the 250th anniversary this year. And every day we're fighting the fight to save our republic. I mean, you have leaders that are here that the President of the United States tried to indict. Senator Mark Kelly tried to indict him this last week. A grand jury, 6 members of the United States Congress. He's going after his political enemies. 4,000, I'll conclude. I don't want to take too much time on this. But I want to remember all those images of masked men, the secret police, something familiar in Germany. Those first images came out of my state, the second largest city in the United States of America. We saw 4,000 National Guard federalized. First time, we'd never seen anything like this. And 700 active duty Marines sent not overseas, but to the second largest city in the United States of America, militarizing the streets of my city. Masked men showing up, unaccountable, no ID, smashing windows, dragging people out, people disappearing in the United States of America. 2 people gunned down and killed just recently. It's a long way of saying this. I'm here, you know, because our immune system has been woken up. But so is the American people, and I think increasingly the rest of the world. And I've seen it reflected in Davos. I see it reflected here in Munich in a very positive and powerful way. He exploits weakness. That's his strength. But he responds very differently to conviction, character, purpose, where people are expressing themselves firmly and formally. And I believe that the tone and tenor of Rubio's speech today is reflected in that. It has been reflected in the actions of many European leaders. And I believe Europe feels more united today than it has in some time. And perhaps maybe that is the one contribution of Donald Trump.
Mr. President, same question to you. How important is your support of these values to your constituents and to your stewardship of the Transatlantic Partnership?
Das ist, nein, überhaupt gar nicht.
No, not at all. Not at all. Quite the contrary, Governor, quite the contrary. I think what you just said is really moving. Of course, we're watching it in the news. We read the reports, we see. But if the governor says there were 5,000 people coming into my city with masks, that is something that makes you afraid. Because to us, America is a special country, the land of freedom, the land of liberty. It's a country with these big values, living and breathing these big values. And of course, that's the country that also brought these values over to us after the darkest times of the German history. We brought the world into darkness, and then the Americans came and showed us how we could do it. And then hearing such stories, it makes me very concerned. And there are 2 levels to me that make me think, that make me wonder. You know that the Christian Democratic Union, my party, historically speaking, always had a relatively good relationship to the Grand Old Party, to the Republicans. But we Christian Democrats, at the moment, do not recognize the Republicans anymore. And of course, we continue looking for contact. We continue looking for these touch points. But we can see that those people who we had contact with, who we have contact with, either no longer are there anymore or have nothing to say, have no power anymore. And that is a development that is quite problematic for us. And that's why, of course, it is even better than ever before, that we always kept a good contact with Democrats as well. That's one level. The other level is that, of course, it also affects us as a country. It affects us as Europe. What seemed to be a given for us is no longer that. For me, it was always a given. This was my absolute conviction, my personal certainty. If anything in this world becomes difficult, if anything becomes dark, if the light goes out, then at the very least, America and the Europeans, and then of course especially the Americans and we Germans, will be standing side by side in the face of that darkness. And that is no longer the case. We saw a very unfortunate spectacle in the Oval Office when President Zelensky was really embarrassed. A president whose country is fighting for freedom. And of course, it was the California National Guard who was the first ones who came very, very early and helped the Ukrainians. You trained them, you gave them the weapons. And then we see that. And that's why it's a true fracture. And now we have to deal with that here in Europe, of course. And I just want to say one more thing. I think there's a world coming up that is based on deals. It's no longer based on values. And that is something that is very, very new to all of us. And I think we have to tell the people, only the deal makers profit of the deals, but not the people. None of you will profit of these deals, only the deal makers. You have to know that. It's a world of the powerful and rich, and it's a world that is dangerous. And I still want to say, and I think also the German military, the European military would agree, it does make sense that the Americans always, with Bill Clinton, with Biden, with Trump 1, Trump 2, of course, anyways, that the Americans said, listen, you Europeans, you need to really do your homework. It cannot be the American taxpayers who pay for Europe's safety and security. You have to do more for that. And I think, and I agree with you on that, I think that the only positive thing is at the moment is that we are finally growing up in Europe, that we become sovereign, that we become more resilient, that we really understand that we have to take care of our own destiny. But I think when it comes to the rule of law, when it comes to freedom, I think we are, of course, at a completely different level. And I think that's also what I said in the very beginning. And still, I would like to say that Germany should be careful to apply all of these debates to the transatlantic relationship. We should not have these debates damage this valuable relationship. We must maintain the transatlantic relationship. We must keep with it. We must build bridges. For example, by way of talking to a governor like you, such an impressive governor who runs the 5th largest economy of the world, California, of course. And I think it's very important, and I think we all have to be aware that this American way of life, that what America embodies is still at the core of America. It's still in there. And that's why we have to foster the dialogue. We have to stay together. And what we must not do is we must not be divided. Let's stay together. Let's stay in touch. Let's have these encounters. I think that's what we can, and best at this level, on the state level, on the subnational level, and that's why it's great to have such a panel.
And if I may pick up, I appreciate your generous words. And Trump is temporary. It's important to understand that. He'll be measured in a matter of years, not decades. If he were a younger man, I wouldn't necessarily say that. There's no question he would seek a third term. Unquestionable in my mind. I don't say that lightly. I can back that up. But his time of life, not his state of mind, make this a temporary moment. And that's why it's so important, in the spirit, again, of this conversation, this notion of subnational relationships, stable partnerships. We are now, unfortunately, the United States, and I've never thought this happened in my lifetime, the source of more instability than any other nation in the world, the United States of America. And that's why we have to remind folks that this is not permanent. And I know there's a lot of pessimism that somehow it's irreparable. We'll never go back to our original form. And I understand that. Once a mind is stretched of what's possible, it never necessarily goes back to its original form. But I say it's not dead, it's dormant. You may need to sleep with one eye open. It will take time, But it's certainly not dead. And it's not representative. Again, he is an historic president. And it's important you understand this. Historically unpopular. He is going to get crushed in the midterm elections. Crushed in the midterm elections. He's going to lose his authority under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose tariffs. He will lose that at the Supreme Court in a matter of months. That's been the source of most of his energy and most of his negotiating power. And by the way, the source of most of his direct dealing. The most corrupt president in American history. What are so many of the foreign policy trips have in common? Members of his family there first. Setting the tone and tenor, setting the course of the deal for the tower, the golf course, for the investments, for the crypto. Witkoff, not just Trump. Partnerships with the family. It's all there in plain sight. It's open. It's not the $400 million planes as the tithing and gifts. Billions and billions of dollars in the last year. It's not about policy making, it's about profit making. And the tariff capacity has been one of his principal tools for self-dealing. But the challenge is, and this is a challenge in terms of not bending the knee and standing firm and tall, not just governments and foreign leaders, but corporate leaders, universities, law firms, and the media. The imperative of standing tall. Because right now, President Xi is blushing. Crony capitalism is not free enterprise. It's not a healthy horse pulling a sturdy wagon, as Churchill once said. It's state capitalism. NVIDIA, the tithings, Intel, MP Materials, golden shares at U.S. Steel. Kiss the ring. That's not the America I grew up in. And it's not the America you just described. And God bless, we're inspired by it, as we all were. Hardly perfect. And so that's the imperative of this moment, to establish different relationship to this moment and to remind people that this is temporary.
Both Germany and the United States are facing the growing popularity of far-right parties with hate-filled and sometimes violent ideologies. They are cooperating with each other very transparently around the world and across the Atlantic with the help of the White House at times. And I'm wondering, Mr. President, how dangerous is this threat, and what have you found are the best ways to diffuse it in your state?
I do see, well, yes, I do see very concerning developments when you look at France, when you look at other European countries, but we don't even need to look elsewhere. We can look at Germany and see what's happening there. And there aren't a lot of people abroad who see that we're in a special year in Germany. It can become a year of great uncertainty or of great strength. We have 5 regional elections coming up in Germany, and that means that a big part of Germany is going to vote this year. And we also have 3 municipal elections, and we have these regional elections that are important because they happen in Saxony-Anhalt, in Berlin, by the way, and in Mecklenburg-Western Pomerania, the former eastern part of Germany. And I think it's an incredibly complex problem that you're mentioning, and there's not a panacea, one answer that fits all. The most important thing for politics is don't promise too much, but keep every promise you make. Secondly, we need to have a very clear-cut policy, very frank language. We have this discussion in Germany about homeland security, migration, but we need to do that without foam in front of our lips. We need to have a debate in Germany that needs to be brought back into the mainstream. The problem of democracy isn't that you talk too much. The problem is when you stay silent for too long. So the debates that people urgently want to have cannot be pushed aside. They need to be had. They need to be held, and they need to be held in the middle, in the center of society. And one more thing, and that's the last thing I want to mention, and I think it's the most important aspect. There's this story of the dysfunctional state, the narrative, both on the right and on the left hand side. And I think we need to ensure that this state is a functioning state, a well-functioning state. That means we need to cut down on red tape. We need to increase the trust and confidence into the state's institutions, and we need to invest. We had a debate that you're also having in California. Should we increase our debt to invest? And we broke with a lot of tradition, also my party tradition when we came into power. The federal chancellor was told, you are breaking your electoral promises. No, we're not. We're investing into the state to remain functional. And I can tell you, the broken streets of today, the broken bridges of today, those are the debts of tomorrow. And I want my children to live in a world that functions and that works as the world that I grew up in was. And that's why we need to invest. That's one of the most important tasks. And those are the tools and instruments against the radical developments.
Results. I love that. And we have to own that. My party has to own that. I have to own that as governor. Look, I think one of the things that's self-evident is this economy is not working for enough people. We could talk about growth, but we don't talk enough about inclusion. I think it was Plutarch who said, maybe it was 50 AD, look it up. But about over 2,000 years ago, Plutarch warned the Athenians by saying the oldest and most fatal ailment of all republics is the imbalance between the rich and the poor. Fast forward today, we're talking about the first trillionaire. I live in a state, exhibit ABC, Your Honor. And we have to address that. And we haven't. The system is broken for too many people. In my country, 10% of people own 2/3 of all the wealth. In my country, if you're 30 years old and you talk about populist movements, you talk about young folks and the nihilism that we're experiencing increasingly, at least in my country, and I think in other parts of the globe, particularly young men, which is a challenge, a unique challenge, young men, the crisis of young men and boys. If you're 30 years old today, for the first time in American history, you're doing worse than your parents' generation. That's code red. So in an environment like that, you're done with the two parties. You're looking for something different. You're looking to, in the vernacular of those old enough, to scratch the old record, shake the machine. And Trump understands that. Bernie Sanders in American politics understands that as well. So how can we drive this sort of populism, the progressive values, but around the kind of results that people deserve? But we've got to own the problem. It's not good enough just to identify the problem. We've got to own the solutions at the same time to the problem.
Great. Okay, I have one more question, and then it's to you guys. President Zelensky gave a powerful speech today, and we already talked a little bit about Ukraine, but let's just turn to that. Mr. President, you mentioned that the California National Guard had an important role, and Germany, of course, and its localities have been of great assistance to the Ukrainians. So why don't you each talk about why that was important to you? Go ahead, Mr. President.
Yeah.
It is a war in the center of Europe. We're dealing with a war criminal and a group of thugs, and it's Putin's war. It's a atrocious event that is happening in the center of Europe. And let me say one thing. The discussion is sometimes a little lopsided here in Germany, but it's not, quote unquote, about Ukraine. It's about Europe as a whole. What we're seeing in Europe has an impact on Europe as a whole. And Putin, buzzword Eurasia, is not going to stop should he end up destroying Ukraine. He's going to march on. And if Europe as a whole ends up being in a situation of war, ask the Poles, the Lithuanians, all those who are already familiar with it, then this is going to have an impact on the United States as well. It's going to end up being a big problem. And let me reiterate, I thought it was great that very early on a state like California took the decision to take over this function in Ukraine. It was early. It was stellar what you did. And two events really had an impact on me. This humiliation of Zelensky in the Oval Office, and by the way, the red carpet in Alaska. The red carpet in Alaska. those who didn't understand what was happening there, I mean, those were images that left me shaken. And to concretely answer your question, it's about a lot of human suffering. It is about hunger, cold, nights without electricity, days without electricity, and permanent war and shelling. When I ask my mother how she experienced the Second World War, she tells me the most horrifying stories about, people in bunkers, nights spent in bunkers, how people hoped that the mother would return. And this is what children, people in Ukraine are also experiencing. And for that reason, we very early on said we are willing to shelter them. In Europe or in Germany, we took in 1 million people from Ukraine. In the state of Hesse, 100,000. And I can only say we have to keep doing that. We have to keep supporting the Ukrainians. We need to help these people. We need to do everything in our power to end that war, and not under Putin's condition, but under our conditions. And for that, we need the United States.
We're proud, and thank you for acknowledging our National Guard, the same National Guard that were federalized and weaponized by the Trump administration. They're training the Ukrainians before the war and continue to advise. We're very proud. We've sent 7 field hospitals to Ukraine. We have one of the largest nonprofits in the world, Direct Relief, that sent over $2.2 billion of supplies, medical supplies to Ukraine. And the MOU we signed today is all about the rebuild. But it's not about the version that Donald Trump is advancing. And again, forgive me, I know I could come off a little aggressively, but I can back up what I'm saying. I want to remind you, just in terms of the self-dealing, part of the peace plan the president was pursuing with Jared Kushner and Witkoff and the head of the Sovereign Wealth Fund in Russia was around the rebuild and who gets their piece of that rebuild. That's, again, not the America I grew up in. So we want peace. We want the right deal, but we don't want a piece of Ukraine. That's what distinguishes at least our belief system and our approach from the current administration. I thought it was one of his strongest speeches today. I thought it was outstanding. And what a case he made, and what a point of pride to have his back and to be back. And I will just end on, just because you painted a human face. I don't know if any of you have been to the Ukraine House, and you walk in and there's this beautiful video. I didn't know what it meant. I walked in and out 2 or 3 times without pausing. I've got 4 young kids, and there's 2 kids on the screen, 2 beautiful young girls that were kidnapped. And they finally found them, brought them back home, and the video is of the 2 beautiful young girls waking up for the first time back at home in their bed. That's what this war is about, human beings. Yeah, it's about human dignity, free expression. It's about democracy. It's about Europe. It's about all the values we hold dear. It is about the alliance, but the preciousness of life as well. And so I pray that the president's desire for the deal leads to a deal that's good for Europe, that's good for the Ukrainian people, but sets the tone and tenor for the world that we're trying to build.
Beautiful. Okay.
I know you now want to include the audience, but let me say one more thing, because it needs to be said. Very often at the international level, we haven't fully understood what's happening there. I don't know if you've seen that, but there was a Ukrainian athlete who, at the Olympics, on his helmet, he had pictures of other athletes who died in the war, and the International Olympic Committee disqualified him for that. It should have been the task of the Olympic Committee to erect a memorial for the athletes who died in the war instead of disqualifying this athlete. Sometimes sports can be political, especially when it's about Olympic values. And the values that you mentioned, Governor, are included. Peace and humanity. I would have wished for that. And this shows that a lot of people haven't fully understood that for all of us, it's about one joint responsibility in Ukraine.
Well said.
Thank you. Questions? One here, and then Catherine back there.
Hi, Joelina Mäki. I don't know if this is on, but anyway, from the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. We have some opinions about Russia in Finland, but I'm going to ask about the topic of today. And from both sides of the Atlantic, you might have different perspectives. So to the same question, we all know that Europe was, shall we say, spooked by recent discussions about Greenland and whatnot. So we're starting to go through the thought process of to what extent should we de-risk our critical economic sectors like technology sectors from the United States. So how do you balance the need for partnership and trade in these sectors with needs of national security?
Well, forgive me, I hate that question. Yeah. I mean, but this is a question you're all asking all around the world. This is, it's a question you're also answering. Sturmer answered it by going to China. Carney answered it by a 6.1% new tariff for Chinese automobile manufacturers, not in Michigan, but in China, bringing them into the market. The rest of the world is, de-risking against the United States. You saw the EU do that in South America, and the deal they followed up, that was a stubborn deal for years and years and years in India that finally broke free. That used to be us. So it breaks my heart. And so I'm back to my point. This is temporary. It's temporary. MAGA will not survive past Donald Trump. He's a cult of personality. I said invasive species. Some of you may not know what the hell I'm talking about. But he took over this Republican Party. You made the point. That old Republican Party, some of them are here. I mean, none of us recognize them. They don't recognize themselves. They don't recognize themselves. I mean, Rubio doesn't recognize himself. He was one of the most effective critics of Donald Trump in the United States of America.
Yeah.
He should rewatch his old videos. He was right. Lindsey Graham was right. This is temporary.
Also wenn ich
Well, if I can just add on to that, I think Greenland was a very important moment. And the governor also just gave an answer earlier that Europe finally got it, that you have to stand up, you have to speak a clear language, you have to defend yourself and say, no, not like that. And that's why Greenland was such an important moment to not just swallow it, but say, no, we're talking about fundamentals here. And deal makers don't like that. Deal makers don't like that because all of a sudden they can tell that the deal's not quite working, that all of a sudden they can't just pocket what they want. And I think for us, that's why it's such an important guideline that we have to become stronger, that we have to defend ourselves against these sorts of things, that we have to say, not with us. And that's why Greenland was such a crucial moment. And of course, unfortunately, it's not reached the end yet. That debate is still ongoing. Please don't be mistaken. But that moment of self-reassurance is something that we have to hold on to.
Built on prior moments when you joined NATO, when Sweden joined NATO, and people stepped into that void. And so I want to applaud that as well.
All right, let's take two. We've got Catherine and this gentleman right here. Are you raising your hand? And this gentleman. We'll take three.
Catherine Kluver-Ashbrook. I asked this question as someone who was born in the American Military Hospital in Wiesbaden, Germany. Spent all of my 9 months of the year in Wiesbaden, Germany, and 3 months of the year in Sacramento, California, because that's the way to live a life.
Unbelievable.
That's the way
a unicorn. A unicorn.
That's the way to live an American life. I have a brief question to each of you. Governor Newsom, I've just written a book called The American Wake-Up Call, in German, Der amerikanische Weckruf. And this probably the most forthright argument I make is that governors are the most effective form in a constitutional democracy like ours to resist.
Yeah.
And I don't think this audience hears that enough, frankly. You floated early, well, six months ago, the idea of California, such a prominent tax-collecting state, might withhold. And I say this not to prompt you on that, but for you to have an opportunity to lay out the toolkit that federal states have. You have immunization alliances on both sides of the country now to protect citizens. You mentioned the tariffs. Who made that happen? 11 attorneys general from federal states. So I want you to have an opportunity to say that to this audience. And then to my Ministerpräsident, a quick question. We have major American bases. When I grew up in Wiesbaden, we had Air Force, Army, medical. That's how I learned American pluralism, by the way, by going to Heineberg Elementary School, where you had all those people right there in Wiesbaden. How much have you reflected with your colleague, Ministerpräsident Schweizer, the Ministerpräsident of Baden-Württemberg? What happens if we get not a Clinton drawdown, but a much faster drawdown if those troops leave to our communities that are vital economically and also for our fundamental understanding of what American pluralism means in this country?
Great in here.
I'll answer that.
Okay, thank you very much. Michael Gahler, European Parliament, accidentally also from Hessen. The point is I would like to an extent come to the original topic of this bottom-up cooperation. What we are doing in the Foreign Affairs Committee, going to the United States, our experience in Washington is, of course, yes, with the Democrats, it's more or less easy. We even agree on our deficits in defense and all that, that's fine. Also with many Republicans, of those who still dare to talk with us, but they say, well, we, even when we agree also on trade issues, on tariffs, we don't speak up, so that's the problem. So what we have decided as a Foreign Affairs Committee, and I'm coming to the bottom up rather, not only since this year, we are going to Washington first, and then we say we go to America, so we visit a state. We were in Wisconsin, we were in Virginia, we will continue this series, and my point is to say, because of the current administration, and I wonder whether we could, in a way, get that systematized, that we bypass Washington but talk with the state administration and the entrepreneurs, and especially in those areas where there are European investment, so that they realize that we get them to acknowledge what we have got in common, where our mutual benefits are when we are investing in the States and they in Europe, and thereby exercise then, perhaps indirectly, pressure on the representatives from the Republican Party who think the tariffs are a nice thing. So my question would rather be, I mean, we in Hesse, we have Wisconsin. You might have, I don't know whether you have a state somewhere in Europe or a region. So to systematically get policymakers and entrepreneurs together who would then on the regional level make it very clear what we have got in our togetherness, and that we should not accept this approach of ignoring not only our history but also the mutual benefits that we enjoy as we speak. $2 billion a day is the European American turnover, and I think we shouldn't risk that.
Well, we should talk, but next question.
Thank you. My name is Karsten Friis. I'm an academic from Norway. Governor, if I may push a little bit on the temporality of Trump and Trumpism. I'm sure you've been asked from this before, but nonetheless, we all hope you're right, of course.
Yeah.
Yes, most of us hope. but still, I mean, there's something about the structural things you talked about, the structural challenges in the United States. So a kind of rebranding of MAGA without erratic behavior of Trump could still emerge, all right? I mean, there are still warning signs out there, or not?
Yeah.
Okay, unfortunately, like a couple minutes to each of you to answer those. Yeah. Do you want to start, Minister President?
I'll be very brief. So first off, you are truly the personification of what we're talking about, a German-American. I am very happy that you are here today. But regarding your question, of course, that's a very serious topic. We are absolutely intensively dealing with this as the German states, that we remain the center. And of course, we are the most important military location for the Americans in Europe. And I think this is really going well on multiple levels between the German military and the US military. But it's also going so far that we in Wiesbaden, it goes without saying that for official occasions, we always invite the US Army, that we also sing the US anthem. We also show the flag. Now, Michael Gahler spoke about a thing that's also very important. I think this year, I'm not sure if we have our German U.S. ambassador here. I think he wanted to come. But I will visit Washington on the reunification day, and we will also go to Wisconsin, 50 years of Wisconsin, the partnership with Germany, with a delegation, with students. I think that's very important on a human level to just stay there, to keep engaging and to keep fostering that relationship and to not give up on the other partner on the other side of the pond. We must not give up on each other. We simply have to continue this dialogue. We have to maintain in touch. I think that's the most important thing.
I agree with the premise. I mean, for me, I think about the United States in the context of bottom up, not top down. If you don't like the way the world looks when you're standing up, stand on your head and go local. Remarkable things are still happening at the local level, particularly at states. The framers of our Constitution, notion of states' rights, 10th Amendment, federalism. Trump is challenging that, but he's challenged by that. And you're seeing this great divergence in the United States, red and blue. The forces of transformation, the forces of restoration. Those that want to bring us back to a pre-1960s world. Some cases, sometimes I think it's 1860s. And that's the dialectic we're having in the country. And you're right, states are on the front lines of those battles. So I think governors play a significantly outsized role at this moment. So do those relationships at the state level, those stable relationships, and those business-to-business, people-to-people relationships. They matter. The reason I'm more confident than most about Trump is he has a unique capacity to dominate the narrative. He has a unique capacity to be either the hero or the heel, always the star, winning 24/7 news cycles like no other politician. J.D. Vance doesn't compare to that. The MAGA movement is already fraying in the United States. You see some of the intellectual leaders like Ben Shapiro attacking other members of the MAGA movement. Anti-Semitism playing a big part of all of this. You're seeing it fraying. You're seeing Republicans now move because they recognize they're out of a job in November unless they buck this president. 6 bucked the president just this week on tariffs in Canada after Trump threatened them in the primary. You're seeing members of the movement drop out, but have the courage, Marjorie Taylor Greene, to at least have the courage of their convictions and express themselves. I just don't see it. I don't. And I think the emergence, there's no King's rallies. People are waking up. I think it was, Brandeis said, in a democracy, the most important office is office of citizen. Citizens are rising up, and their voices are being heard. That's why he moved out of Minnesota. And so I'm just seeing the contours of something that gives me a lot more optimism. I'm paid to be optimistic. But I really believe it. And I just will not allow this pessimism to be painted. I just don't believe it. And that's why I want you to believe, not just in my state, but my nation and the partnerships that we have enjoyed but can no longer take for granted over the last 70-plus years. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Beautiful night to end on. Thank you both so much. Thank you.
Great. Great.